Welcome to Transformative Transformational, a Teach Beyond podcast. I'm Keane.
And I'm Heather. We're here to explore what it means to be transformed in our own lives and how that overflows to living lives of transformational impact in our communities.
Today, I know is going to be a fun topic for both of us. I think we can both admit that we really enjoy using ChatGPT and have had many discussions over how to use it and new discoveries.
That is true. I feel like discovery is a good word. The trying to figure out exactly how, not just how it works, but like how I can work with it, right?
Yes, I agree. And even, I'm going to share a recent thing that I just discovered, a way I've started using it.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be interesting to memorize all of the US amendments. There's no
Oh,
real purpose to that. I just thought it'd be
yeah,
interesting.
that's
And so,
sure.
sure. So I had ChatGPT write a list of all the amendments and write a one sentence summary of what they are. So, easy
Okay.
to remember. And then on top of that, I also had to give me a list of memory pictures to create with it. And so it gave, in 2 seconds, a list of all the amendments with ways to memorize it. And within 1 hour, I had memorized all of them.
Oh my word. That is so amazing. I mean, just the fact that it like created the summaries and the word pictures and mnemonics immediately is just fascinating, but then also how quickly that worked for you. Okay, this is something to pay attention to. And I feel like I'm always trying to learn ways that other people are using AI because I wouldn't have thought to use it that way. And there's other things that I never even knew it could do. So I'm definitely a copycat, I guess, when it comes to AI. But I don't know. I feel like that's okay because it's helpful to know the developments and how to leverage it well and to kind of pattern off of other things that we see to then use it and apply it in ways that make sense in our context. So recently, I watched a live stream event called Gather 25. It was a 25-hour event highlighting the global church in different sites around the world. And oh my word, there's so much more I could say about this because I absolutely loved the event. But in terms of AI, it was amazing how they were leveraging AI for this. And they'd been planning the event for quite some time. And even during the course of planning the event, the technology was growing in a way that allowed them to produce the event that in the way that they did. But the technology didn't exist when they first started making some of their plans. So it was fascinating to hear some of the background of that. And they were leveraging AI for subtitle translation for some of the speakers in other languages and yeah, just other applications that made it possible to do an event of that scale.
It is so interesting. It's so interesting to hear about how it's being used and just kind of how widespread it's become so quickly.
Mhm.
And we could talk
Mhm.
about how to use it for a long time. We could talk about practical tips. How do we think about it and engage with it as Christians, or maybe even what its implications are for society on a large scale?
Yeah.
Today's conversation is going to be focused more on how educators can use it. If you want
Right.
to listen to a fuller discussion on how to think critically about what AI means for us as Christians, you can listen to our conversation with Thorsten Marbeck in episode 147 called Being Human in the Age of AI.
Yeah, that's great to point back at that one. And our guest today is Dr. Benny Fong, who is an associate professor of graduate education and statistics in the Division of Education at Southwest Baptist University in Missouri in the United States. Dr. Fong has his bachelor's degree in general mathematics and master's in applied mathematics, both from California State University, East Bay. He previously worked in education in East Asia and now resides with his wife and children in Missouri.
Let's go over to that conversation now.
Welcome to the podcast, Benny.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, Benny. We are so excited to have you here to talk about this topic. It's such a hot topic right now. So we're excited to be able to kind of dive in to see how it might play out in education. And as we see AI shift the way people work and how they engage in their day-to-day life, especially as this is such a new realm for people, I'm so curious, how did you get into this topic?
Hmm.
Maybe specifically, like, what was the first time you saw AI being used that made you realize, hey, this is going to have a big impact. This is a big deal.
When I first saw it was actually when I was kind of deep into this kind of topic called machine learning and artificial intelligence. And then around like 2020, so this is pre ChatGPT, some of the models being released kind of for researcher like me. One of the model was generating essays and emails.
Mm.
And this is 2020, so way before ChatGPT was released in 2022. And I said, whoa, if I could generate recommendation letters and email, which I was using, it saved me 5 to 10 hours worth of work right off the bat. And I say, oh man, if it gets into the public hand, yeah, this is going to be a game changer for society.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. So yeah, you knew about this long before most of the general public did.
Correct. So to segue into that, how did I get into it was I was a principal at an international school. I transitioned back to Seattle for that 1 year, and then I applied and I got a job as a professor at here at Southwest Baptist University for being a dissertation quantitative chair. And part of it
Mm,
too, they wanted me to also teach some of the math classes because they were short some math teacher in linear algebra and statistics. And some of the hottest application of linear algebra and statistics in about 2018, 2019 was in machine learning. And one
mm,
specific application of machine learning was in artificial neural network, which is the backbone now for these generative AI and large language model that you see. That's
mm.
kind of changing the society now. When 2007, some of you probably wasn't, but just young kids there. When Steve Jobs held that iPhone in 2007 and said this is going to change, when I saw the generative AI and just the machine learning, I said, yeah, that is going to be the moment. And even
Uh-huh.
before that, at least not in the education realm, in the business and the computer science realm, things were heating up for machine learning and data science.
Mm,
It's just that the researchers at Google were then able to find a way to connect natural language processing and generating um, language and text and audio into kind of connecting to the public rather than just the business and computer science realm. So I
mm,
kind of knew something was going to happen. Obviously, nothing could prepare for how big it happened once OpenAI released their free model in 2022 because they needed money and they did it,
mhm,
and definitely generated the buzz they needed to stay afloat with more funding.
hmm, hmm.
Benny, as you've been a teacher working in a university, I'm wondering how have you seen AI being used now that it's open to the public, kind of well known. How have you seen AI being used in education from the front of the classroom, from the teacher side, not just students using it?
On the easy end, when I kind of gave talks to in-service, the easy end is obviously lesson planning. It significantly lessens the amount of time. Onboarding new
Mm,
teachers, because that's really hard to do, teaching new teachers how to lesson plan in context to maybe the school's standards and benchmark. Uh,
mm,
but these large language model and chatbots does it really, really efficiently, really fast. And you could even explain it to teachers too. So it helps onboarding,
mm,
helps with that. Differentiation is another one.
hmm.
A lot of us, when we plan in the classroom, we just plan to the middle, 60, 70%. And we kind of, a lot of times, we leave the gifted end or the people that's a little bit more help kind of in the wayside.
Hmm.
So the ChatGPT and those large language model really helps in terms of creating more assessments and more authentic kind of work and lessons to help those that are either really far advanced or really behind. Um,
Mm,
the the highest impact, though, I would say, would be for administrator, for teachers. Really, I've seen in real time is the real time translation. Like I just even as higher ed, I have a tennis player. He's from Serbia. Once I turn on my PowerPoint and there's automatic translation to Serbian, yeah, he was just perk right up and just really pay attention in class and learn a lot more.
mm, hmm,
Another thing that really helps with one thing as educators we do a lot is meetings,
hmm.
whether productive or not, we do a lot of meetings, or everybody does. So the note-taking applications of these large language model, like through Otter AI or just even through our iPhone now these days, helps
Yeah.
tremendously. So that that when it summarizes the transcript, then at the end asks for action items and summarization, it saves hours and also increases engagement rather than writing things down.
Oh man, I'm sure that you have piqued everyone's interest with all of those. Like, if we can save time with note taking and with preparing lessons and with, even if you're not in the classroom in serving in any type of leadership role or anything, there's these ways that we can leverage this. So, we want to get into more of the specifics and the practical in just a moment. But maybe first, I'd love to know what educators might have as a misunderstanding or misconception about AI and what you would want them to know instead about that. Like, I'm just thinking, you know, what we might see as the tip of the iceberg about AI or misinformation. What comes to your mind about that?
I think the first one is obviously that the students, once they gotta kind of see the power of these I think the teachers are afraid that they would use them as a replacement for learning and for teachers. Kind of like Khan Academy does that really, really well. Because they have like personalized kind of chatbot tutors for math problems and writing and things like that. I think the misconception obviously is that the kids will just shift totally to using an artificial teacher or something. I think the reality is, obviously being adults, we've been through learning, whether college or professional development. We know the book learning is really only one part of learning.
Mm,
The bigger
mhm,
part of learning comes from a mentor, a teacher, a guide to kind of light that fire of curiosity, like that fire of
mhm,
synthesis and making connections. Right now, the chat box and LM can't do that. Doesn't form a relationship. Doesn't kind of find ways to
hmm,
inspire more, kind of, inspire a kid to be better, inspire a kid to be a leader, and teachers are not going to be replaced by AI doing that. The other
hmm,
misconception is that you can see like ChatGPT as like a glorified Google. You
mhm,
just you want to know something, put it in
mhm,
there, right? And this is so like 20 years ago when the search engines come out. And that's not what AIs do. AI can give you these one-shot prompts. It can give you maybe useful information like a Google search would, but the whole idea of generative AI is to generate new content based on past context and experiences, information. So it does a better job if you were to ask, how do I plan like a dinner party for 10 with a Indian theme or something like that, or plan a trip for Christmas market to go to, Salzburg, and
mhm,
give me ways to get there, from Berlin or something. It does a better job when there's actually more context, more steps, and then it does even better when you iterate the process. So that
hmm,
the AI you could, and that's why when you look at it, why do Microsoft name it Copilot? Why do Google name it Gemini, which is a twin? They want people to see AI as like a assisted, a image of
uh-huh,
themselves,
uh-huh.
extension. So that's when we look at it rather than just a glorified Google search engine.
How can we do that better? How can we kind of see it that way? Like, what kind of practical advice would you give someone who is trying to adjust that way of thinking to see it as their co-pilot, so to speak?
I would just take it back to when they get their first smartphones. I mean, I think at with the Gen Alphas, they get their smartphones when they're like literally third or fourth grade. For us, maybe I'm Gen X, and maybe and then I believe you guys are millennials. It might be you got a smartphone, obviously like 2010, 2012 or something in college or something. I mean, initially, it's kind of say, what can I do with this? It's like a look like a glorified iPod. Yeah, I play music off of it. Right?
Right, right.
But then as the capability mature, then you could start doing more, more elaborate stuff like texting, taking memos, taking pictures.
Mhm,
So with AI, you got to do the same way. You just have to treat it as a new technology, emerging
mhm,
technology. What are you comfortable with? A lot of people would be comfortable using it like a Google search engine initially.
mhm,
And then going beyond that, the iterations, say, I want better refinement results. And then we'll talk about it hopefully later about using the multimodal feature where you could
mm,
feed it music, feed it pictures, and it could actually do some pretty crazy and out of this world thing with pictures and sound and
mm,
sight.
It's so interesting as we talk about kind of how to use AI and even referencing Copilot and Gemini, how it's like assisting kind of next to you. How do we approach AI in like in a healthy way, in educational context to make sure we're using it appropriately and things like to avoid using it? So maybe the idea of having a teacher do lesson planning through AI is concerning to a teacher hearing like, oh, they're going to just offload all their work, all their mental load onto it. So how do we approach it in a good way?
As with any technology, we got to know the ethical boundary and the privacy first. I think that the one thing that I think we forget now that we're in the third decade of the 21st century, that any data we put in the internet and our phone really is not private anymore. So the first thing I learned is about the privacy aspect. There are ways to protect usage of AI. So, for example, if you use Copilot and your school has a Microsoft license, there's a way to sign in so that your data isn't being fed back into Microsoft or other people to use that data publicly to train, update their model. So learn about that. Other ethical stuff is pretty. I think society agree on it. Plagiarism, uh, just copying and pasting new content and claiming it as your own. That I think that like, society accepts that that's that type of plagiarism or unoriginal claiming work that's unoriginal is not the right way to do. and the transparency in the algorithm, I think that's a little harder to understand. But if we take the time, even just maybe 5 or 10 minutes to understand that these AI models, yeah, even though they're powerful, they're useful, they're trained on data that are might be biased, that might, maybe not biblically world, the biblical worldview may not be there. So understand that some of the generated content really is maybe needs a little bit more critical thinking, and that our biblical worldview still matters, and the Holy Spirit still needs to kind of live within us and be strong in us to discern the content that's generated.
As you even mentioned, kind of biblical worldview, like the idea of the AI model having a worldview is such an interesting thought. This is my personal experience. Is AI is very affirming of whatever you believe. It will kind of speak back to you like, "Yes, you're right. Good thinking," and then give you an answer that makes sense. And then if you
Don't we love to hear that?
yeah, then if you phrase the question in the reverse, it'll say like, "Oh, you're also right." And so how
Huh.
do we engage with it in a way that makes sure that we get maybe a right answer if that's even possible, but knowing that we're not just kind of affirming our previous biases by how we word our question to get answers out of it.
That's the crazy thing about these new AI models that we work with. The prompts that I hinted earlier, what you would do if you want a more adversarial answer or a more judgmental answer, you could just tell it to be more judgmental, just to be more adversarial.
Huh.
It
Yeah.
could
Huh.
take on personality. So that's one actually pretty cool application that I have with my students before. Is I pretend like you are George Washington, tell me about your view of modern America, or tell me how
Mm,
it was, things like that. So if you want a more biblical worldview or more adversarial or more non-affirming tone, you could just tell it right away first before you put in your prompts.
Mm,
And, and,
that's
and that's
interesting.
the crazy part about these artificial neural network kind of backbone or large language model is that they're trained with data. They understand inflections. They actually do understand sentiments. That's why
mm.
it's natural language processing. Billions of dollars are poured into these things. So it can take on personas that you wanted to take on as you interact with the models.
Okay, so Benny, around here, I'm known for asking the practical question. I'm like, all right, let's see what this actually means for us. And you've already hinted at some of these things: differentiation, lesson planning, meeting notes, like some really practical applications that I know will be really meaningful to our daily lives. I'm curious, maybe for someone who's just starting out, someone who's explored a little bit, or someone who's further along, what practical suggestions do you have for educators specifically who are looking to use AI effectively?
I think the lowest fruit on the tree would be lesson planning. So I think all teachers have to go through that.
Mhm, mhm.
Uh, and just putting is ChatGPT generate a 5-day lesson plan on teaching how to factor with examples, with uh, you know uh, warm ups and just assessments, and even and with the solution key, it could do that pretty quickly. And then to go beyond that, that's where the iterative process comes in. Is as well. And after they do that, can ask the model then to say, well, what do I do and differentiate for those that are struggling with it, and for those that have finished it literally in 5 seconds? What can I do
Mhm.
to engage these students further? So that's
Hmm.
one low fruit on the tree. The other one I would say is, instead of using Google to search for information, try these other new model with the AI infused, like Perplexity or Copilot. And Google obviously have their own built within Gemini, but I think there's a little kind of couple settings that you have to go through to kind of click it in. So, like for instance, I have an experimental or sign up for it, so that when I search in Google, the Gemini AI is also there, so I get to see that results right away if it's built into my search engine.
Mhm. Mhm.
Oh, and then I guess after the beginner, if you're an intermediate user, yeah, use it. Which I've seen super useful is, a lot of us are in multicultural setting. Use it for real time translation. The parents and
Mm.
the students really appreciate that. Once you do that, it just opens up a whole new world, because right now the student feels comfortable. So, oh, somebody is making
Mm.
effort to translate English content in real time to my language. I don't think it's the action that necessarily communicates that. I mean, that's great. It's also just the gesture.
Mhm.
Another thing too is try the multimodal feature. For example, My father-in-law he's a biology professor here too. So the multimodal feature, basically the vision feature, is so awesome that if you take your cell phone and take a picture of a flower, a dandelion, or a tree, or something like that, or people, scenery, the AI actually does a pretty good job in helping you identify what's there and also suggesting on if I say like if I take a picture of an oak tree, I say, I like oak trees. Can you give me other suggestions? It'll give you, I say, okay, maybe look into,
Huh.
you know, juniper trees or something like that.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
so try the multimodal feature. It opens a whole new world for a lot of people that are curious about their surroundings.
Yeah. I'm curious for the translation and for the multimodal features, um, where like in the context of what would that be found? Is that in ChatGPT or does someone use a plugin for a PowerPoint or you mentioned earlier the PowerPoint translations? Like where can a educator who is new to this find those resources and make sure that they're accessing, what would be most helpful?
The translation one, I believe, okay, so I believe most of us your school has a license for it. When you create your PowerPoint under the subtitle tab,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
click on that. Within the subtitle, it'll ask you the input language is English. The output subtitle it allows the output in literally like 40 or 50 different languages
Sure.
that are supported.
Yeah.
And I had it checked with obviously people that are native to certain languages. Like I used it for Serbian,
Yeah.
used it for the Prague, the Czech language. They
Mhm.
say it's pretty much like 95% accurate, even with
Okay.
the context and everything, because it's AI based, not heuristic based, so it's much better translation. And then for the multimodal division, once you download the app, like they say for ChatGPT, Gemini, or Copilot, down in the corner, usually there's a plus sign. You just
Mm,
click on that, it will ask if you could access the camera on your phone. And once you do that, you just take a picture, you put it into the chat GPT. Yeah,
mhm,
and then you could do things with that picture, ask information about it, give it context. The fun one would be like, I take a picture, say, where am I in the world? It does a
hmm.
pretty good job of telling you where you are in the world. You feed it a picture.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. Let's take a short break. And instead of our story from the field for this week, we'd love to hear from you. How are you using this in your classroom? What are you hearing in this episode that you'd like to try? Or what are you wrestling with as a school? We'd love to hear from you as you explore AI in your classroom. Reach out to us at podcast.teachbeyond.org.
For our weekly spotlight, we are focusing on Belize Christian Academy, which I do always like to mention is one of the few Latin American countries where the primary language is English. So, just helpful piece of knowledge for you.
Yes.
To explore opportunities to serve in Belize, visit teachbeyond.org/go.
And now back to our conversation with Benny.
I think it's interesting you mentioned kind of lesson planning and differentiation. And even at the very beginning, you mentioned teachers were worried that maybe kids would replace teachers with ChatGPT. Um, and the idea is that they're not necessarily replacing writing papers and like solving homework assignments, but actually like learning through it. So, how do you suggest teachers engage with these things as they're creating a lesson plan? Like, do they take lesson plan and just print it off and they're done? Or do they like read through and kind of think through what went into this process or the differentiation part of it?
That's a really good question that I'm obviously passionate about because my doctorate actually is in educational leadership, and that's actually a question for where educational leader like principals and curriculum directors always ask is like, how do I in, empower and engage my teachers so that they go beyond just planning lessons and executing in class? So obviously, I think if we're teachers, we taught a number of years. The first thing is we go to what our standards and benchmarks are, our grade level indicators are, and then ultimately we have these formative assessment that leads finally to those summative assessments. So these questions are automatic for us educators who've taught for a few years and they're not beginning teachers who has maybe MED in curriculum and design or something like that. So those are the questions or I guess the process when we have to use the AI. If we really just simply, I'm a first year teacher. I just want to get it done so I could get to sleep by midnight. AI is great for that. But if we are taught many years already, we have our lesson plans done for many years, and now it's time to step it up to increase engagement, maybe transparency, increase differentiation, then AI is really powerful in that regard. So when it comes down to it though, so we don't want to shortcut the process. We don't want to shortcut the process for beginning teachers to become good teachers.
Mhm.
We don't want to
Mhm.
shortcut the process for students to learn their content. And at the end of it, what connects it is the pedagogy between the teachers in teaching the students. And AI
Mhm.
could do that, but it requires a comfort level, a knowledge level. And I always go back to get to the iPhone. You know, when it came out in 2007, people don't know how to use it beyond being a glorified iPod. And right now, yeah, ChatGPT is a glorified search engine if for most people. But now that we are almost like 15, almost, yeah, coming in 20 years removed from the smartphone, people use smartphone pretty much in the right way, except maybe the doom scrolling part. but but people use it, you're listening to your I bet you many of your audience probably listening to your podcast through their iPhone or through their smartphone. AI is not quite there yet because it's only year number 3. Hopefully, we'll get to the point where teachers and students will make the correct ethical decision based on what they want to accomplish, beyond just saying, I want to do a shortcut. I need to go to sleep, or I want to write this paper so I could go to soccer practice faster.
Well, that's it's such an interesting point that as we learn the tool, as the technology continues to advance, and depending on that stage as an educator that we might be in, we're going to interact with it differently. And I'm fascinated by the fact that um it can be used to get the work done, but it can also be used to enhance our interaction with the students. And ultimately, as believers in the classroom, we want to be caring for our students, helping them experience God's love, and also get a great education too, right? So this is helping us as a tool, but it still depends on us as the educator in the room living out that relational aspect, that this is a tool to that end. Would you agree with that?
Totally. I think the danger, obviously, is always viewing tools as good or bad. It's always nuances. And I think the more that we understand the tool, kind of like what you were saying, Heather, we understand the pluses, we understand the minuses. I think that's what you're hinting at. The better we could wield this tool better for God's work and for his kingdom work.
Mhm.
I love how you describe it as a tool. That makes a lot of sense. And so, as this tool is changing, it looks different right now than it did a year ago. It'll look even more different in another year. And we want this podcast episode, your advice to kind of be long lasting. And how do we use that? How do we understand this tool, even as the tool changes? The tool is what it can do change, but how do we engage with the tool in a healthy way? So, yeah, do you have any rules of thumb for that?
Definitely. I think the easiest answer, number one, as educators, is that we're lifelong learners. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
we always go through professional development, just like doctors do, just like lawyers do, just like accountants do. We are professionals, and I think a lot of times parents and uh, and even teachers themselves don't see that we're professionals. We go through training, we do a lot of work. So that's the first thing, is that we got to have this lifelong curiosity. I think if we view this tool AI and not curious about it, especially now that we see it's really impacting society, yeah, then we kind of fall behind, especially because our student is really embracing it. It is their generation, so
Mhm.
we need to be curious about it in the right way and be open to it. And the other thing too is, even if I think sounds like you two are pretty far along, you are either sold on it or you actually used it in certain aspect. The reality is that that mindset really is far ahead of the bulk of our society and bulk of our parents at this point.
Mm.
And that kind of societal, or even in the school wise, the kind of collective, you know, culture has to catch up, and we have to be mindful of that. We're early adopters, but early adopters could also be like nail that sticks out. So we have to
Mhm.
be, we
Mhm.
want to be practical, we want to adopt it, we want to have people to use it, but we don't want also to be that nail, and that everybody's like, oh, here's Betty going again at it, or here's Heather going at again at it. And I think that's something I learned. I was like that when, when 22, 23, when it first came out, say, oh, here's Benny again going about AI, droning on about how it's useful. Well, 2 years later, I didn't have to say I told you so, but it's definitely right
Yeah.
there already. So we don't want
Yeah.
to come to that for teachers within the classroom and everything.
Mhm.
The other evaluation, really, I guess the criteria is as Christians is it does it serve a spiritual mission, or does it really align with our biblical worldview? Using it to something that's really mundane, like generating form emails or writing class newsletter and things like that, I think is great. But obviously, is really a bad form to start plagiarizing and to start just
Mhm.
creating 100% lesson plan using AI and not
Mhm.
double checking it.
Mhm.
It's, I guess, no difference than pastor who recycle sermons from a previous church and they don't, you know they have years and years of sermon. They're
Right.
tired. Maybe they just pull out a sermon they preached a couple years back. It's
Mhm.
because we're getting paid for as educators to engage and to teach. We're not being paid to just recycle
Mhm.
teaching content.
Mhm.
I think we might have some disagreement there, but at the end of the day, our audience changes, our student changes, their
That's
mood
right. Yeah.
changes. They
Yeah.
could be, a student could miss breakfast, and all of a sudden the whole classroom dynamic changes. So,
Yes. Right.
so that's what AI. We don't want to degenerate down to that, and really, what is our profession
Yeah.
want? What does a biblical worldview want? So that's kind of another one. I think lastly, the thing is, I think the reality is being living in the 21st century is that flexibility really is the key. Gone are the days where you could literally live in a farm and do your farming and maybe go to church and be left alone or something like that. I don't think our workforce, I don't think our parents, I don't think our education system is like that, that we could be silos, that we could just be
Mm.
left alone. So we kind of almost have to be flexible in certain aspect in how we interact and engage with people. Obviously, I'm not talking about doctrines and, uh,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and core values, but AI is really just the latest in terms of tools that forces us as educators to be flexible in how we engage
Mhm.
our stakeholders.
Mhm. Mhm. That's great. As things continue to develop, what are some ways that educators can stay on top of what is new?
I'll start with what's not being new first. I think the rate of motion with schools, and when I look at the policy, it's not keeping up with the tech
Mm.
and with the student content, student knowledge. So that's a danger there. Because we see this all the time with technology, one-to-one computing. Yeah, before that, obviously the iPhone, Apple watches. So when their policy doesn't catch up to what's latest, then the disconnect doesn't come to the administrator; it goes to
Yeah.
the teachers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, to I wouldn't say keep up to date yet. So the roundabout answer to that is the first thing is administrators, education leaders have to start. They're the one that runs
Mhm.
the classroom. I mean, the building.
Mhm.
They need to recognize that things are changing. They need to work with the teachers and parents and students to formulate prudent policies first to get on the same page. And then once things are in the same page, I think then that frees up the teacher then to to the next step, which is to innovate and to learn and go to like listening to podcasts and this content or go to
Yeah.
teacher conferences like
Yeah.
ICEC conference, ACSI or things like that to start learning and collaborating. But like I go back to what I said earlier, if a teacher want to go on the cutting edge and learn about it, they just become the nail that sticks out
Mm.
within the building. People will listen to it, but they will see that person as just a early adopter.
Yeah.
Again, maybe it's just too roundabout. My thing has always been the education leadership within the building or within the district
Mm.
until the leaders step up and communicate what is the intent of AI and how it could either empower or hinder learning. It's really, really hard for a teacher to be caught in that rock and a hard place.
Wow. Well, naturally, as change and like these technological advances and all of that has brought change over time to your involvement in education, I'm certain that other aspects of your experience as an educator have also brought transformation for you as an educator. So, can you share a little bit about that as we're closing?
I think it forced me. to think about pedagogy and then higher ed, andragogy, how adults learn, and it forces
Mm,
ourselves on how we learn, ingest, and comprehend material. Right now, your audience is listening to you to the podcast, but obviously 10 years back, everybody is still reading it through web pages or maybe the blogs. And it forces us, why do then podcast then is a more relevant to medium now versus it wasn't 10 years ago? It's because everybody has a cell phone connected to the internet all the time. And
right. Right.
uh, AI is doing the same thing for me. It's like, how do I then communicate pedagogy or andragogy for adults? How do I communicate learning? How do I communicate instill curiosity? So what
Mm,
it's doing for me is it's moving away from content delivery,
mm,
basically just the facts, like 1776 signing of the Declaration of Independence. That's easy stuff. Even 20 years back, people could just go Wikipedia and just get that information. So teaching no longer is even information delivery. That is just people don't have to go to encyclopedias anymore. They just search it. To now, we want to build specifically with biblical worldview the salt and light and ambassadors
mm,
uh, to the world that needs the gospel. What does
mm,
that look like with the help of AI? And for me personally, it's like I am kind of minimizing the mundane stuff being just simple facts, email that are just really repetitious, simple letters that could be just generated. Minimize the mundane stuff so that I could maximize the relationship. Because
mhm,
just like the Jesus example and also Paul and Timothy, we don't create leaders or specifically Christian leaders with just information. Or we just hand them the Bible and say, here, read the read the book of John or read all the red lettering from Jesus. It doesn't work like that. Real leaders are created through mentoring and
mm,
through relationship. So
mm,
what I feel is that AI, if used properly, can actually maximize that relationship building and mentoring aspect of
mm,
those around
mhm.
us.
I love that focus of still what AI, what computers can do, but then also back to what humans can do and what we're made to do.
That's right.
That's so helpful. Thank you, Benny, so much for joining us, for having this conversation, for sharing these insights. Um, One last question before we let you go, and that's something we ask all of our guests, and that's what's one thing that's changing your life right now. So this can be something big and a serious thing, or something small, wherever you want to go with it. I'll go first, and then Heather, and then you can go last. So you get a little bit of time to kind of think through it. What's changing my life right now is kind of, I guess, a mid technology. Is these boogie boards, LCD writing tablets where you can kind of scribble on them. Kids use them a lot to like draw a picture. You press the button and they erase, kind of like an etch a sketch
Huh,
almost.
huh.
But I've been enjoying it, just kind of writing things, doodling, drawing ideas. They've been very easy. You save scrap paper, really, is what it comes down to. So I don't have a lot of scrap paper anymore. So now I have one of these that I can just doodle on. So it's been really fun to play with. So that's what's
Nice.
changing my life this week.
That's great. Wow, we both went technology and we don't always do that, Benny. So I don't know what that means about this conversation. It's inspired us to think that way. But um for me, it's an app this week called the Habit Share app. And I have put in there kind of different things that I want to build as habits. It's everything from, workout or cleaning or, different pieces like that, reading my Bible, things that you want to build in. And then you can also share those with friends. So then, if you want accountability or just to like check in on different things, it doesn't even have to be habits. It could just be, other aspects of life. It's kind of a cool social element, very low technology. It's an app, but it's pretty basic. But I found that I'm entering in there the things that I want credit for. Like I did the thing and I feel good that I can check it off. So that's been fun lately. What about you, Benny?
For me, a couple of weeks ago with Valentine's Day, our church have these marriage retreat, and I've been
Oh,
married for 12 years. We have three kids, and a fourth one coming in
oh,
June.
congrats.
What's reaffirming during that marriage conference was the topic was on grace, and moreover, what I kind of is again being more in tune again is grace from God really is really what we try to emulate, because if we just have human grace, that's a totally different kind of definition than grace from God. And that grace with each other in a marriage, even though we're 12 years in and we have a lot of kids,
Yeah.
is so needed every day. Maybe more so my wife for me, giving it to me than me to her. And also too is just and then kind of have to be wrapped around that agape, that sacrificial love that God also demonstrates too. And it's just it's fun to kind of now after that conference, like, what can I do to show my sacrificial love to my wife, and what can I
Mhm.
do to exhibit grace for little areas that really doesn't matter in our marriage, and to
Mm.
build each other up.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing that and for all that you've shared with us today. We really appreciate these big thoughts and then practical, actionable tips. And so, thank you so much for this conversation. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and good luck with to everybody in there. I know you guys are doing God's work and
Mm,
salt and light. And I miss being an international school teacher, but I hope
mm.
that you guys will continue your work, and God bless you and your family.
That was a great conversation. I like how far ranging it is, from how to think about AI and engage with it
Mm.
thoughtfully to the really practical things of just how to actually get subtitles to work with translation on your PowerPoint.
Right, right. And as I was saying before, having these practical tips can help us think, okay, what is the application for my classroom, for my team, for, my workplace and my life that, hearing examples can hopefully help us find, new ways that this could be applied.
Benny also mentioned the importance of being a lifelong learner and the importance of going to teacher conferences. Teach Me On is hosting a US based teachers conference April 11th to the 12th. And the focus is to help educators see their classroom as a sacred space for spiritual and academic transformation. Visit teachmeon.org/conference to learn more.
Keane and I serve with an organization called Teach Beyond. As you have heard, education plays a big role in missions, and Teach Beyond is a part of that.
As followers of Jesus, Teach Me On is a global community providing transformational education services as part of God's ongoing mission to transform individuals and communities into all He intends.
Want to learn more and get involved? Visit teachbeyond.org or follow us on social media.
To help more people find the podcast and hear about Teach Beyond, we'd love it if you would leave a rating or review and share the show with a friend. Be sure you're subscribed or following the show on the platform where you listen so you never miss an episode.
And as always, you can reach us at podcast@teachbeyond.org. We'll see you next week.